Welcome to FlightGlobal Focus, a new podcast from FlightGlobal offering insight and analysis about the aviation industry. We'll be publishing episodes twice weekly. Join us every Friday for a review of the week's news, and again on Monday for a deep dive into a topic from the worlds of aerospace, defence and airlines. I'm Dominic Perry, FlightGlobal's aerospace editor in London. In late July, South Korea agreed a new trade deal with the USA, heading off the imposition of hefty tariffs. That was followed on the 25th of August by a meeting at the White House between President Donald Trump and his South Korean counterpart, Lee Jae-myung, to discuss a range of topics. Just hours later, Boeing announced a major win. Korean Airlines committed to acquire 103 aircraft, an almost even mix of narrow-body and wide-body jets, including 28 of the in-development 777X. But this is not yet a firm order. Assuming it is finalised, it will be a significant windfall for Boeing, the latest in a line of deals hammered out by a US president who is swiftly transforming into the airframer's salesman-in-chief. The orders have fuelled what many view as a commercial resurgence for Boeing, which in the first 7 months of the year had booked 699 gross orders, well above the 228 it recorded in the same period of 2024, and better even than the full-year total of 569 last year. It has also seen Boeing outstrip its European rival Airbus this year, which had, at the end of July, booked 501 gross orders. Here to discuss the topic are FlightGlobal Aerospace Managing Editor John Hemmerdinger in the USA and FlightGlobal Aerospace and Air Transport Editor David Kaminsky-Morrow in London.
Hi Dom, this is John. Thanks for having us.
Hi Dom, it's David. Thanks again.
So John, talk us through Boeing's recent performance and Trump's impact on that.
Yeah, it's something that I don't know that we've ever seen before. I've never seen before. Aircraft orders have always been a part of geopolitics, but it is to a degree that is rather unique under President Trump. He started this year pledging and starting to renegotiate trade deals with just about every significant U.S. trade partner. And initially that created this huge concern among the aerospace industry, and some of that concern still persists. But the concern largely was that aircraft, with tariffs and counter tariffs, aircraft would become more expensive, that aerospace companies would suffer. Angus Kelly from AirCap actually warned that a trade war might lead U.S. airlines to stick specifically to Boeing jets and all non-U.S. airlines to order Airbus jets, and we'd have a separation of the market that way. But that hasn't happened, at least not yet. And whether it might still remains an open question. But what we've seen is, at least for Boeing, is a real resurgence under President Trump. You mentioned him being, or rather becoming, the salesperson in chief, and that's kind of what it is. So let me talk you through what's happened so far. In May, several years into his first term, or second term rather, Trump was touring the Middle East, and he was negotiating these trade deals with various Middle East countries. And it was really remarkable because when Trump was in Doha during a televised event, Trump was sitting at a table with four other people. We had Kelly Ortberg, and we had the Qatari Prince Badr Mohammed Al Mir, and we also had the CEO of Qatar Airways. And with Trump watching, sitting right next to Ortberg, they signed this massive deal where Qatar Airways is going to, they actually ordered 160 Boeing jets. These were firm orders, and they took 50 more options. And so that was potential $96 billion deal. It's just huge for Boeing. And the fact that Trump was in the room was remarkable.
Have there been more of these deals?
Yeah, and I was going to mention, I put together a list here because there's been several. It was a couple days after that the White House itself announced that Etihad Airways will purchase, this appears to be not a firm order, but Etihad will purchase 28 777Xs and 787s. I'm not sure we know the breakout between those two, and they're going to have GE Aerospace engines. And then on top of that, after Trump was in Saudi Arabia, Saudi lessor Avilease ordered 20 MAX 8s, and they took 10 options. So that was the Middle East raft of orders that came in. It only continued. Just in July, President Trump met with Bahrain's prince at the White House, and immediately thereafter, Gulf Air committed to buying 12 787s. And then came discussions with Japan, and Japan agreed to buy 100 Boeing jets as part of a U.S.-Japan trade agreement. I'm not sure we know what airlines those 100 are supposed to go to, but it all adds up to something like 310 orders if you include, or 310 commitments to buy 310 jets. And if you add options, more like 360. It's just a massive lump of orders that came in with Trump and Trump's negotiations. It's remarkable.
Has Boeing acknowledged the billions of business that Trump is ginning up for it?
Yeah, well, they sort of had to. During their last earnings call, their second quarter earnings call, one of the analysts asked Boeing CEO Kelly Ortberg about this and what he thinks of Trump being one of their biggest backers, and he admitted it. He said the quote was from Ortberg: "Everybody's looking at their trade imbalance and saying, how do I address that? And there's no better way than to make a big aircraft order." End quote. And he may be right. If you're a country looking to appease Trump and to address a perceived or accurate trade imbalance, and you commit to $100 billion in Boeing jets, well, and you're going to need aircraft anyways, it might make some sense.
David, presumably this hasn't been taking place without an Airbus response, or at least Airbus booking its own orders this year.
Yeah, well, Airbus hasn't had a particularly busy July, but that's not a surprise. It's listed over 200 orders in June because that's a month in which it's coming off the back of the Paris Air Show, and at the moment, July also it's heading into the holiday season. So it's not had quite the same impact in recent weeks, but it's running at just over 400 net orders for the year so far, which is above 2024. But Airbus's main priority isn't really adding to the backlog, it's ensuring that it can deliver the aircraft that are already on it. Now, having said that, there were some fairly substantial orders during the Paris show, the notable ones, things like the Saudi Lesser Avilis that John mentioned has ordered A350 freighters. Riyadh Air, the big Saudi startup airline there, has gone for 25 A350s. And there are other successes at the other end of the aircraft spectrum for Airbus, particularly LOT Polish Airlines, which has gone somewhat controversially, I have to say, for the A220 over the Embraer E2, which was seen really as the one in pole position.
And what's Airbus's response been to these orders, and particularly Trump's involvement in them? They don't seem to have an equivalent salesman.
Well, Airbus chief Guillaume Faury, he's been fairly philosophical over Trump's influence on the Boeing order book. He described him during the half-year briefing at Airbus as, quote, a powerful sales guy, unquote. And if Boeing is benefiting, then really this just forces Airbus to be a better company. And Faury is confident in Airbus's ability to compete with its product lineup. He says, quote, we have excellent aircraft to win on the market, unquote, as you might expect him to say. He's fairly robust in that statement. But I don't think that anyone really believes that the fortunes of a multi-billion-dollar global aerospace industry is solely going to be determined by technical superiority of products. I mean, political relationships are a part of it, and all large aerospace companies will use political leverage, even if they don't want to overtly acknowledge it. The whole transatlantic subsidies saga a few years ago at the World Trade Organization was really all about which government was backing its aircraft manufacturing company the most. Airbus has unveiled orders during state visits. A bit of political hobnobbing always looks good. Look at the order for sort of 300 aircraft during Chinese President Xi's visit to France in 2019. Another when President Macron made a reciprocal visit in 2023. The big difference is that Macron isn't using strong arm tactics and the threat of tariffs. These things are usually played out with more carrot and a lot less stick.
Is Fowry's equivalent of a Gallic shrug about this, led in part by Airbus outselling Boeing in many of the preceding years, most certainly since the MAX crisis?
I think Airbus is fairly confident about its position. I don't think they'd ever be they wouldn't be dismissive about Boeing's position. They know Boeing has had a bit of a hard time recently, but sooner or later they're going to be back on level terms, and the Airbus isn't going to dismiss its primary competitor, really its only competitor in the field. So I don't think Fowry is being complacent. But having said that, Airbus has a huge backlog to deal with. And as I said, their main concern at the moment is not really adding to the backlog. It's nice, but Airbus really needs to be able to deliver to customers. And that's the key issue at Airbus at the moment.
And how are the two companies doing raising their deliveries? Are they managing to increase output?
Boeing has actually had really good success in starting to deliver more aircraft. Of course, it's coming from a much different place than Airbus. It's coming from a place where there were no 737 MAX deliveries during the grounding 4 years ago, and then during all the quality issues that affected Boeing that dried up MAX deliveries and 787 deliveries, and then last year the FAA slapped a cap on 737 MAX deliveries due to that Alaska Airlines door blowout. So all these quality problems. But the good news, if you are with Boeing, is that they have reached their goal of producing 38 aircrafts, 38 737 MAX every month. They had been working to bring MAX deliveries to that rate for quite a long time, and they are now there. That is the cap that the FAA is currently allowed Boeing to produce to. And Boeing has said that as soon as it gets stable at rate 38, it will begin the process of asking the FAA for permission to raise production to higher rates. They want to go next to 42 and have said that that could come this year, assuming FAA approval. Flipping over to the 787, now produced only in North Charleston, South Carolina. Boeing recently bumped production of that jet from 5 to 8 monthly, and they plan to go even higher. By all accounts, Boeing is getting its production system, getting a handle on it. They seem to be addressing the quality issues. The FAA seems to have given them some positive feedback. They have given Boeing some positive feedback so far. Of course, that could all change at any time. We know with these things in the past, one incident throws an entire recovery off the rails. But under Kelly Ortberg, CEO since last August, there has been a real change in Boeing's production system. And the other thing I did want to mention is unique to Boeing, didn't happen at Airbus, but Boeing had a machinist strike late last year. It lasted close to a month. And all the supply chain problems that Boeing and its suppliers had been having, they got a little bit of a reprieve during that period, and Boeing and its suppliers were able to build up some stocks, starting to stockpile some components and parts, and that has aided Boeing's ability to get more aircraft through production and to reach the rates it's at now.
And how do the numbers stack up at Airbus, David?
Airbus is aiming to try and deliver 820 aircraft this year. That's just commercial aircraft. And as has been typical of Airbus for the last several years, that is a very backloaded delivery schedule. In other words, most of those deliveries are going to happen in the second half of the year. Airbus is running behind, partly because of an engine shortage issue on its A320neo line. It's simply not getting enough CFM LEAP engines supplied to its production line. So it's kind of resurrected this term gliders to describe the aircraft that are parked at various places, still awaiting engines. That was a term that was being used a few years ago when they ran into a similar kind of supply shortfall. Airbus is hoping to sort of recover that over the second half of the year. That's going to be a bit of a tight race. CFM has a production recovery process in place. So Airbus is reasonably confident that it can meet the overall delivery target for the year, but it's going to be fairly tight.
Just to go back to orders then, are we expecting more of these Trump-delivered deals for Boeing?
Yeah, Dom, that's a good question. We do expect to see more of these deals. It very likely could happen. And in the last several months, when Trump has been meeting with world leaders, we've been waiting for an aircraft order to follow, and they have. The USA still has several trade deals that they have yet to negotiate with major trading partners. Those include India, Taiwan, Brazil, Mexico, and perhaps the biggest one is China. The U.S. right now has a steep import tariff on Chinese goods, and China has a reciprocal steep import tariff. That is thought to be temporary until the countries reach a formal trade deal that would presumably bring down the tariff rates. We don't know exactly when that's going to happen, but we do know that the U.S. and China are negotiating, and the whole process has apparently been wrapped up in factors including U.S. gaining access to Chinese rare earth metals. But that said, there have been reports just in the last week that Boeing is working to secure what could be up to a 500 aircraft order from China and for airlines in China. At the same time, Airbus is undoubtedly working toward securing some of that also. So we don't know yet what's going to happen. We don't know how much Boeing might get or how much Airbus might get. And it all depends on how these trade discussions play out probably in the next few weeks.
So of the deals that Trump has brought in, are these all firm orders?
They are not all firm orders, and therefore they might be taken with a bit of a grain of salt. Some of them were firm orders. Qatar, 130 787s and 777s. That's a firm order. Avilease, 20 737 MAX 8s. That's a firm order. The other deals, however, several hundred other with Japan and with South Korea and with the others have been described as commitments or intents to purchase. There don't seem to be firm orders behind them yet. That raises the question or the prospect that they may never actually materialize into firm orders, or they might not at the numbers that have been discussed. It also is completely feasible to consider that in 3 years, if the U.S. has a new president, perhaps of a different political party, maybe a Democrat, that the airlines would not necessarily feel pressure anymore to make good on these orders. We just don't know, but we do know that it's really positive momentum for Boeing.
Thanks for joining me today, John and David. That was a really good discussion.
Yes, thank you, Dom, for having us today, and we will see you back with the Aerospace podcast next time.
And likewise, thanks very much, Tom.
If you want to learn more about our FlightGlobal podcast, then head to the FlightGlobal and Airline Business websites. Join us again on Friday for a roundup of the week's aviation news with other members of the FlightGlobal team, and again next Monday for another deep dive topic. FlightGlobal Focus is a production by FlightGlobal with audio production by Lucy Johnson. If you have any questions, comments or suggestions, or for commercial opportunities, please email podcast@flightglobal.com, and more information can be found in the show notes. Listen, rate, review and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.